So simply spending our lives with Krishna is what is really what lifts us above the material nature. Without Krishna, we are just going through the dualities in this material world: happiness, distress, sukha or dukkha. And but these are not at all ours. Our relationship with the material body is a temporary one, and it is just not part of our true self. It is simply a temporary identity. And that temporary identity is always changing also in this world. Bhagavad Gita speaks about devasmi yata dehe, as we go from childhood to boyhood, to youth, to old age. So simply changing conditions, changing situations. So somehow or other, to absorb ourselves in Krishna more and more, that is the essence. And whether that is through chanting or through hearing or worshipping Krishna on an altar or expanding his glories in this world. All these things are having the same result. That we see our relationship with this world as real but as temporary. So whatever we can do in this world to increase the glory of Krishna, to increase our own attachment to Krishna, our own reliance on Krishna. These are the things. But that is easy to say and summarize everything like that. But we see that great personalities struggle. In the Bhagavatam you have Bharat Maharaj, who somehow or other gets caught out because there happens to be this deer, and the deer is chased by a hunter, and Bharat Maharaj is sitting nicely on a river, and he's in deep meditation and nothing else. That's all he's doing. He's like really on the spiritual platform. But then this deer jumps from across the river, and a little, you say foal for a deer also? Yeah, deer foal or whatever. Deer foal, foal. A foal pops out, falls into the river. Now what is Bharat supposed to do? Let that little fall right under his nose. So naturally, being a compassionate personality, he fishes that little foal out of the water. But then, the mother, who had been chased by a hunter, somehow or other in fear jumped over the river, but on the other side of the river died of a heart attack. So then suddenly there is Bharat Maharaj, sage in the forest, who has really focused on spiritual life, along with a little deer. And the little deer needs like a mother. So what to do now? So Bharat Maharaj became kind of the mother, right? At least as much as he could. Started to care for this deer, provide for this deer, whatever it needed. I don't know if he got milk or whatever, but these are the kind of things you're going to be needing, right? When you're suddenly stuck with a little deer. And that little deer, it began to take him away from his spiritual absorption, and he began to get attached to the deer. He began to play with the deer. He was always thinking, my dear little deer. And that, of course. And then it is said, according to the Vedic literature, that Yam Yam Bhavi Smaram Bhavam, at the end of his life he became a deer. He remembered a deer, he became a deer. Yeah, that of course, but because he had been a great sage, as a deer, this deer was remembering the previous life. So therefore what Bharat Maharaj did as a deer, stayed near an ashram where there at least was always some kirtan or some katha and some prasad, and we just live right next to this ashram and never budge from there, and in this way spent a deer life, and then in the next life becomes the sage Jat Bharat, who is basically decided to be very careful, to be very, very careful, to say like, well, so Jat Bharat was thinking, if I get a material education and I become expert in material things, I might get distracted from a spiritual goal. So I will just not get educated. So he was the son of a Brahmin, but he couldn't be educated. So they tried to teach him that at least after eating he should wash his mouth and his hands. And he just couldn't get it. He did it before or in the middle or whatever, but always at the wrong time. You know, it was hopeless. He couldn't learn anything. Right? So in this way, Jat Bharat was considered the greatest fool, but it was a strategy to just stay away from any form of entanglement. Like some people look for a job, some people are hoping to graduate, some people are hoping to retire, some people are looking all for a comfortable position and arrangement. Jat Bharat refused to do all that, he just didn't do it. And then of course, his father though tried to look after him. His father was his well-wisher, but when the father died, then afterwards his brothers, they just, they didn't feel the same affection that his father had, like, for this useless, crazy brother. So they were like not looking after him very nicely. And then one day, but Jat Bharat had somehow or other a strong muscular body. And one day there was a king, and the king was being carried in a palanquin, and he needed a carrier. So Jat Bharat was enlisted. But then what he did when there were ants on the way, then he did all kinds of awkward steps to avoid the ants. So the king was sort of bouncing around in his palanquin. So then the king let the new bearer, disciplined him. And then Jat Bharat spoke up for the first time. And he spoke deep transcendental knowledge. And then the king, after a while, began to realize that he was dealing with a great sage, and that he had forced a great sage to become his carrier. And that was really not so good. So the king came down from the palanquin, bowed down before Jat Bharat, who then instructed him. So here Bhagavatam shows like a three-life story, right? One follows one person through 3 lives, and that is in itself interesting. Now, okay, some people cannot identify with reincarnation, that's also okay. But the idea behind it is that if at the end of life one is not ready, if one is still has many unfulfilled desires and things to do, then come back and express it. So Jad Bharat was very careful. He learned his lessons the hard way, and he was eager to attain perfection. So he made spiritual life a complete priority. Now drawing the parallel to our situation of course is very different. We are not great, powerful yogis, we are not so determined, but we got this mercy, and then somehow or other this transcendental knowledge is there. And then we try to live with that in the modern world. We're not withdrawn in a forest like sages would be living. We're not living in the middle of deers. Deers are hard to find where we live, you know. Sometimes you see a deer somewhere, but not so often. Don't know in Cape Town if you see a lot of deers. Usually in thick forest. Anyway, so in this way we are living we're living a very different spiritual life than these traditional sages. For example, I'm living a life as a sannyasi, a renunciant, but traditionally the renunciants would spend a lot of time in the forest. So that meant a lot of time for internal contemplation, and then every once in a while come out. Nowadays we're always out of the forest, and you wonder, when do we contemplate? Early in the morning, quickly. You're looking like, geez, time already over. The day has already started again, and so it's in some ways very different than the traditional way of life. There was Chaturmasya, 4 months when the sages would not travel. Things like, wow, that would not be bad, eh? What do you think, Hare? It makes sense. I mean, how many years you've traveled now?
Only 6.
6, eh? 6 years non-stop travel all over, huh? From, Australia to Asia to Europe to the Americas, everywhere. 6 years. Me, 21. And sort of, so 4 months of not traveling sounds like, wow. They figured it out, the old sages. And others also have a story to tell if they compare their life to the life of the traditional sages. So how do we do it in this modern world? And you can also look in other traditions, like the church fathers, who were like also spending a lot of time in contemplation and prayer and so on, all these things. But how to do all this in the middle of the modern world, a spiritual life? Is it possible? Theoretically, yes, but practically?
It's
difficult. Of course, living in the forest is also difficult. Not that that's so easy. There's no hot and cold water. There's no tap that you sort of like, it's the river, and it can be ice cold. And usually when it's cold, the river is also cold. And in Vrindavan, the only time we would have hot water was in the hot season, in the cold, and then it was really hot water. Everything was hot. In the cold season, everything was ice water. And the electricity, which we had theoretically for heaters, they would turn it off to save the electricity bill. So at night, when it was really cold, they would turn off all the electricity, so you're in the dark, you couldn't be. In the night, when you need electricity, at 6 o'clock at night, you turn it off till 6 in the morning. So candles and extra blankets, and cold water. But in our world here, we have these things. Yeah, so I'm thinking about these things sometimes, because I'm thinking about, how do we do it? This fast, demanding modern life. But then I believe in the mercy, that the mercy of Lord Chaitanya is very great. So even although the circumstances are a little bit unfavorable, actually, if you look at it in comparison to the past, we have a lot of mercy. So that mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that does it. That makes it all suddenly possible after all. One personality was Sudama the Brahmana. And Sudama, he had been Krishna's school friend, and he had together been in Ujjain and had their education there in Sandipani Muni's ashram, and they went through a lot. One time their guru had sent them into the forest to bring firewood, and there was a big storm and they got stuck in the forest, and it was a bit intense. Anyway, the guru came looking with a whole group of disciples, and eventually they got found. But they were very close together at that time, Sudama and Krishna. So many years later, Sudama was very, very poor, and Krishna was quite opulent. Krishna lived in Dwarka in 16,108 palaces, and there were no electric bulbs in the palaces, but they were not required because they had studded so many jewels in the walls that the whole room was lit up at night from all the jewels. It must have been something, if you think about that. Instead of light bulbs, light jewels. So it was opulent, very opulent. And Sudama was very, very poor. With ripped clothes, nothing to eat, and so on. So Sudama's wife, she cared actually not for herself, but for her husband, and to see that he was in such poverty. Therefore she said, why don't you go see your friend, Krishna? So Sudama did, and he got that little, and she gave a little bundle of chip rice, which he was embarrassed about, Sometimes they give you a gift to give, and you don't really want to give because so Sudama didn't really want to give it. But Krishna forced him. He said, hey, what is that? Oh no, that's nothing. No, let me see, what is that? What are you carrying there? No, chip rice. Oh, is that for me? Very tasty. And then of course, from just that offering, Sudama got so many blessings, but he didn't realize that. And he didn't even ask Krishna for help. But when he came back, his whole area had changed. There was this lady, came like a queen with servants, and later on he said, "By Jove, that is my wife." Or something to that effect. And then for the rest of his life he lived in a palace. But then we see that Sudama had no interest in it at all. He was given that because he had no attachment to these things. See, we may pray also, "Oh Lord, send me a palace, send me this, send me that." Sudama, he didn't care. For him, that poverty was also okay. He was not disturbed by it. And it's like, so we look at all these personalities from the Bhagavatam, and these are, I'm describing some personalities from the Bhagavatam, and each one shows us a particular important point to take with us. From Chant Bharat in his 3 births, okay, Bharat Maharaj, okay. We can realize we have to be careful. But what should he have done? Let the deer drown? No, you can't let the deer drown. But he should not have stopped his spiritual practices at the same time. He went too far with the deer. So in this way we see great personalities, and we are just measuring ourselves by their example. And then we take our inspiration from them, try and following their footsteps. So like this, we try to construct a spiritual life, because spiritual life is something we should build. We should consciously put some elements into our life, some spiritual, some principles, some support, some practices. These things we should, in this way we should construct a spiritual life. Say, okay, these are my practices. Okay, this is the supportive environment. These are principles I will dedicate myself to. Not even talking just for, I'm talking more than that. But like that. Like that we can strengthen our spiritual life. If we just let it happen, and then it may not happen. And then we start, if we just wait for spiritual life to sort of go along, and then we feel like, but it's not really happening. Because we're not actually taking control of our life. In the sense, not that we are big controllers, we are small controllers. We are controllers to an extent, right? Definitely. So whatever we can control, we should control. And bring in more spiritual influence in our life. But mostly we don't, and we just sort of let it go on automatic pilot, and sort of whatever comes. We're with devotees. Okay, we keep our minimum standards, minimum 16 rounds. Okay, minimum, we do that. 4 principles. All right, we should do 4. So, basic things we do. Try take Krishna Prasad, sometimes it's Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu. Or sometimes not even that. But in this way we do the minimum. And for the rest, automatic pilot. But that's not enough. No, we have to put something in place. Like you see some devotees, they take a vow to read Srimad Bhagavatam, and they read every day a certain number of pages, so that they can read the whole Bhagavatam in 1 year. I mean, it is physically possible, but yeah, it's about 60 pages a day, or less. So, but it could be done. Sort of possible. Not impossible. And to read the whole Bhagavatam once a year. That would be something. If we do something like that, okay, then we get something also. It's just one example of what people do to go deeper in their spiritual. Others, they observe a very strict kartik, but do it every year. They really chant a lot of rounds in kartik and really go for it. And they also, that nourishes them the whole year. We do a simple thing, last few years, doing parikramas in Vrindavan, that nourishes. Before I used to teach in Mayapur Shastra and then do a number of parikrams in Mayapur. And these things, they stay with us. So in other words, we need to do something like that. We have to think of spiritual nourishment. Now that's so we get inspiration from these Mahajans, from these great personalities from the Bhagavatam. And then we make a plan. Excuse me. Then we make a plan to increase our absorption. That's what it is. Nourishment, absorption, I mean, these are things that should come to the foreground. Alright, spiritual life is also about doing things for Krishna. Organizing, being part of festivals, being part of programs, being part of managing things, being part of cooking, that's all a lot of physical engagement. And that's, but it must be accompanied by studying scripture, by hearing and chanting. Scripture is important. Without scripture, Prabhupada said religion without philosophy is sentiment. So then we need that kind of deeper, the reasons, why am I doing this? The essence of philosophy is it gives us a motivation as to why we're going through all of this. And sometimes it really looks like, why? So the Bhagavatam is strengthening us like this. Gives us a strong motivation. So all these things are important. Yeah, so some people are more reflective by nature. Some people are more doers by nature. That may be there. So some people spend more on the reflective side. Some may spend more on the active side. And as we get older, we get a bit more reflective and, a little less passionate about doing so many things. That's also there. But both have to be there. And of course, one can never neglect the reflective side, connection with Prabhupada's books is a key element, which must be there. Deep chanting of Hare Krishna must be there. Though then we can do so many things. But otherwise, we get purified, but we will struggle if we don't root ourselves deeply in the Bhagavatam, in the philosophy. And that's for everyone. You can't say, oh well, I'm not the type. No. Everyone is to be the type. We must... that's why Prabhupada at least said, okay, there's a Bhagavatam lecture and everyone must come. Initially that was the idea because people... But now we don't live in temples. So then we have to do it ourselves. So in the temple you spend every day an hour with Bhagavatam. But if you don't live in the temple, then also an hour with Bhagavatam, whole hour. 1 hour. But we should, if we can, that would be really very good. Yeah. Okay, questions, comments maybe? Yes.
Maharaj, every time I try to make an endeavor for absorption or nourishment, like a concerted endeavor, the wheels fall off very quickly. Like, experience every kartik I start off with something, then somewhere along the line the wheels fall off.
Why? Did you screw them down? You have to screw them down. That means you have to fix yourself. It's not optional. The wheels fall off because you make it optional. It's not optional. You have to screw it down. Say, no, I do this. And in order to do this, I may have to sacrifice some other things. All right, I'll sacrifice some other things. What I'm going to sacrifice? So it's not just I'm going to do this, and I'm also going to do a million other things, and whatever comes up, I'm just passionately going to respond to it. See? Part of it is that we just are not deliberate. We're not deliberate, we're just constantly reacting. We're super reactive. Wherever there's a squeak, we go. No. It's like we have to become more deliberate and say, I'm going to reserve time for certain things. And so I'm going to read something or chant something, whatever, and I do it I make a schedule, and it's reserved time. And we're not going to let anything infringe upon that. That's what I call screwing it down. Then the wheels don't fall off. But if you just sort of like, I'm going to do this, but I'm also going to do a million other things, and whatever comes up, I'm going to respond to at any given time, and I have no organization in my time management, then the wheels are going to fall. So we have to get off this reactive platform. We have to learn to not react to everything. not needed. See, this is like, I was the manager of the big Vrindavan temple. Too many, every day, if I make a list of things to do, there would be like 60 things on the list. I couldn't do that. Right? And those are the things I really couldn't delegate and had to really actually attend to myself. So, impossible. So I did some of them. I wrote it down, I kept it, and sort of said, okay, this one has been on the shelf now for a long time, maybe I'll look at this today, look at that. But I can't do all the 60 things, impossible. So I'm not going to do all that. I'm going to do a selection of them. I'm not going to respond to everything that's going on. If there's a problem, it's got to be pretty bad before I'm going to upset my schedule and deal with it. A fire, something, life or death matter, yes, okay. I'll drop everything and deal with it. But otherwise, one thing I learned about how to fix a problem, first thing is do nothing. Because if you do nothing, then other people start doing something and they fix the problem. And the problem is gone. So the first approach is do nothing. Do nothing. Let people figure it out. And they'll solve the problem. And instead of you coming in like, I'll solve that problem, I'll solve this problem. Yeah. It's really, and this way you're always the problem solver. The whole day, you're the problem solver. And that's my life, I'm problem solver, problem solver, problem solver. No, forget it. Just say, and between whatever time, 3 and 4, I don't solve any problems. Yeah, so, it's like I come to Cape Town and then I've been squeezed in Durban, squeezed in Soweto, squeezed in Slovenia, right? It's like squeezed like anything. Then I come to Cape Town and I think, forget it, and then people on the first day say, can I talk to you? I said, forget it, I mean, door locked, no, will not see anybody because cannot just just do it yourself. Right? It's not like that. So we allow people to take over our lives. And that's why the wheels fall. My wheels also sometimes fall. Hope a little less these days than before. Other question?
Bart, you quoted the verse, young men's Vapi Smaram. Whenever we think of the time of death, then that state will be taken to the next life. And then we also encouraged to do so much of service to Krishna in order for us to go back to Krishna Loka. But then at the same time, we find that it's taboo even because one, in order for us to go back to to where Krishna is, we have to know who Krishna is and what he's doing and all of that. But then we find, even just in ISKCON, for example, it's taboo to even sort of like delve too much into Krishna's pastimes or what Krishna is doing around it. So what should be the right mood in terms of delving into such topics?
First of all, Prabhupada's books. That's our principal nourishment. And you cannot, we may read about many things that are beyond our personal experience. So when we are reading things that sort of we can try to follow, then those things are especially relevant to us. Yeah. But when we start to read about like the gopis and Radharani and their level of love and their level of service attitude is just so beyond where we are that therefore we are not recommended to exclusively focus on that. That's not ISKCON, that's Prabhupada. ISKCON is what ISKCON says this way or that way. That's a society that goes through changes over time. There are different views and so on, but Prabhupada was quite explicit that we should not make that our full focus, the pastimes of Radha and Krishna and the gopis, because the level of love there is very, very high. No trace of lust and so on. So, not that we cannot understand these things and read that sometimes, but we stay therefore with the Bhagavatam. And we read the Bhagavatam again and again and go deeper in understanding the Bhagavatam. And, then there are so many additional literatures written by the Goswamis, but really, so they are for that's Paramahansa literature. And we read a little bit of that also, but not exclusively. Bhagavatam should be all. That's our anchor. But in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is an expansion of Bhagavatam, Prabhupada writes in the beginning of Madhya Lila, gives a whole list of Goswami literatures, and also that these can also be read. But additional, they are more intimate about Krishna, loving dealings with the gopis. So, little.
So Prabhupada said that we could go home this lifetime.
Slightly louder.
Prabhupada said that we could go home this lifetime. And I was just curious that if an individual hasn't achieved Krishna Prem at the end of a lifetime, when they go home, is it different to someone who has? And how does that work?
Yeah, it's like if someone is following devotional principles, but after a short time interrupts that, then Srimatam Gehe, then they will wind up in a either aristocratic family in next life, take another birth. If they have practiced spiritual life faithfully for a whole life, and yet maybe not fully attained Krishna praying, then it's mercy that can make up for it. Now Prabhupada is very generous. So Prabhupada speaks on many occasions that he is very generous. And he says if you follow 4 regulated principles, chant 16 rounds, you will go back to Godhead. So Prabhupada didn't say if the internal state is like has traces of material attachment, as long as we don't invest in it, and we're just faithful, then we can attain perfection. Otherwise, we may come back like a job parent, come back again and carry on with our spiritual life in the next birth. So it depends a little bit how far we have, how faithful we have followed and practiced. But it's not that only those who have Krishna prema now will go back to God. It's possible to go if one has really tried to please Prabhupada and the spiritual master.
And then, is it that the individual is elevated to the platform of prayer by Prabhupada's mercy, or is it that we never achieve that?
No, but then we'll get it. In the spiritual world, everyone has it. So if you enter the spiritual world, you'll get it, for sure. And it's not that there's a few in the spiritual world who don't have Krishna prema and they sit there. Go ahead.
Just on that point, I was listening, I forget what I was listening to, but it said that in the spiritual world that there's different levels of love for Krishna. Prem was like the topmost, but it's not that it's seen unequally, everything is seen equally.
Yeah, that's right. So, there are different levels, there are, but those things are not fabricated here. It's not that we are creating our love here, it's that our love was already there and it became covered. So Nietzsche said that Krishna prema sadhika bunai. So Prabhupada says that our original love will awaken. So our original relationship with Krishna, which was already there, will awaken.
But not here.
It will awaken. It may awaken it, but it's not taking birth here. You see, it's not made here. It doesn't have its origin here. So it's not from, now I'm doing some sadhana, and with that I'm getting a higher form of prema or a lower form of prema, depending on my activity here. No, that's already there. The distinction is already there. We already have an eternal identity. And it's just reawakened by our hearing and chanting and devotional service. So we will at one point resume our original activities, original identity. And that can be partially by sadhana and partially by mercy. So like you do your sadhana, you do your best in service and practice. And then there's mercy. Lord Chaitanya's mercy, Prabhupada's mercy, Guru's mercy, all that mercy adds up. And then Krishna made us accept us. Then you'll get the full prema. So then the covering will be lifted. And Krishna says, Sarva dharma parityaya mamekam saranam vraja. You just abandon everything, surrender to me, and I will take away the reactions of your sinful activities. So Krishna lifts the veil. It's the reaction to sinful activities which is like a curtain. It covers us. We take it away. And then what's left is, then we suddenly say, hey, Krishna prema is there. Was there all along? Was this covered by this curtain of illusion, which Krishna now takes away? And some people doubt that. So you'll always find things on the internet where people question that. How can that be this? And they'll present something else, where it becomes more difficult. But that's not Prabhupada's mood at all. Prabhupada's mood was not like it's so difficult to get that Krishna prema.
In terms of screwing the wheels down, we can do that with our routine and schedule. But when it goes into the cycle, that I'm just reacting, to always wanting to do stuff and then not making enough time for absorption, how do I actually then go into that habit and be conscious, okay, I need to take this time.
So build it up. If I said read for an hour, That's a lot maybe. Started reading for half an hour. And so we can build it up, a practice. So we get some momentum. No, we all feel that when there's momentum, like if I get up every day early in the morning, chant my rounds every day, same time, then you get some momentum. So that's good to build up momentum.
And like the mood in, if you're someone who gets scared to refuse service or something, then you know how to.
Yeah, okay, that's. It's hard to say no. I know, but I have that problem also. I'm also not good at saying no. But sometimes we have to. If you don't, and to protect our spiritual practices, we have to say no. Otherwise, and that may be hard, but we have to learn to do that, to protect our spiritual self-interest. I'm also trying to learn.
But then whereas the flip side is doing the needful.
Yeah.
Where does it fit in?
There's no limit to the need. There's always a fire. You can join the fire brigade. Yeah, you can join the police force. No, there's no end. I'm saying, it's like you become a policeman. Doesn't mean you're gonna eradicate crime. Crime will go on, right? You may become a policeman or not. Crime will go on. You know, you try and do something about it. But if you're an idealist and you think, I'm going to free the world from crime, you're a dreamer, right? Because there's more crime than you'll ever solve. The criminal propensity is there. If you become a firefighter, you know, it won't be the end of all fires. So at one point you got to say, look, you know, I'm not going to be a firefighter my whole life and just run from one fire to another. Yeah, and let my whole life be consumed by these things. And then you get a tombstone that says he was a great firefighter. Yeah, if that's what you want on your tombstone, you can have that. He was a good soldier. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, it's like I sometimes refer to in Sydney, opposite the temple is a park, and then there's a war memorial there. It said, the greatest thing a man can do is give his life for his country. And when I read that, I'm thinking, I don't know. Maybe if the war breaks loose, maybe I'll go for a couple of years and come back after it's over. I don't know if I would die for my country. Not so sure. If that's the greatest good I could do. I'm not convinced about that. I think the greatest good I can do is give spiritual knowledge to people and maybe to use my brain not to die in the war and then keep on going after the war. Of course, if you get caught in the war, alright, then, you know, if there's no way out, alright, then I'll fight. I'm ready. More than all
That's your machine gun. That's your machine gun.
What else did you think of this? I'm not going to fight with a catapult, you know. I fight.
Would devotion to your country, to your culture, would that be regarded as material?
Yeah. Ultimately. Now, you know, I'm from Holland, right? And then in Amsterdam we have this big plaque which says, I'll say the Dutch and then maybe you understand it, maybe not, I'll translate it after. Als een volk voor tirannen zwicht, dan dooft het licht. Yeah? If a people is succumbing to tyrants, then all light extinguishes, and it rhymes in Dutch, right? So there's this thing, stand up for justice, and of course the Second World War was a war like that, right? Like where people with great belief against fascism, the demoniac forces have to be stopped, and so on. Yes, okay, that's true. But there is a greater thing we can still do, because it's ultimately material, and these wars will come. Wars have been there throughout history. I have an encyclopedia which shows, the wars from the last 2 millennia. Right? It's like an encyclopedia, and it's encyclopedia of war. And it has all the wars from the last 2,000 years, the main wars. And it's not that war is going to end. And, these days the Third World War looks closer than it did 20 years ago. The tension in the world is building up everywhere. We can't stop these things. Russia and America is building up again. China is got more arms than they ever had. Everything, all these things, and smaller conflicts. Okay, Korea is shaking hands today, but for how long will that last? So, South Africa, the murder rate is increasing, right? In the country. Land acquisition, what's that going to do? Is everyone just going to let them take the land? I don't know. Is that what they're going to do? Just let them? Or are they going to fight? So wars will come. Should we fight them to defend the land? Or should we just say, well, save what you can save and get out of there? And ultimately, what does it matter? Someone's land or someone's land. Is that the goal of life, to have someone's land? So if one fights, just protect the land. That's material. Maybe we can try and protect our land if we can, but if the circumstances are overpowering, what's the point? Then better go. Why fight? Why fight when you're not sure you're going to win? Why fight a losing fight? I learned that long ago. I only fight if I think I'm going to win. If I'm definitely going to lose, I'm not fighting. Forget it. Then I get out of town. Then I avoid the situation. But if it's unavoidable, okay. Then if there's no other option, okay, I'll be a martyr. That may be there, but I'm not looking for that. If it's like, let's prosecute Hare Krishna, I don't mind putting on some blue jeans. What's wrong with a little beard, I'm saying, it's like, I'm not going there, kill me,
Maybe, if I can say this, maybe it's good being almost old. I don't have to worry about it, we leave it for the younger generation. I can just devote my time, or try and devote it to my spiritual life.
Yes, yeah. Same here, it's like, Bible also says at that age now, you go, well, you know, one way or the other, whatever comes. Any comments? A message for the devotees for the meeting.
Yeah, reading Bhagavatam is good.
Huh?
Reading Bhagavatam is fun.
What are you reading now?
The prayers of personified Vedas.
Prayers of the personified Vedas. That's serious stuff. Okay. It looks like plates are there. So that's good. I'm running out of steam. But there's not steam in the kitchen. Vedas personified. So what about? So we're defeating Mayavad there.
Yeah.
What else?
I just started. The first question is pretty good.
What was the first question?
How does the Vedas describe the absolute truth? If it's about the three gods and the Vedas are all about the three gods. So a nice example just to perceive the material world, you need senses, sight, hearing, and everything. So the Lord He's very merciful. He can make the indescribable describable. So to get an example of someone who may be born blind and deaf. So things in the material are just as invisible to him as someone who's in the material world and can't perceive Brahma and the absolute truth. But the Lord, He will make it describable because He's very merciful. He gives the ability to perceive the absolute.
Yeah, because although we're born, even if we're born blind and so on, still, by nature, soul is able to see. So it's just a covering. So the forms are actually known to us. It's not from all. He's never seen it because he was born blind. How can he know? No, he knows from the beginning. Sorry. Back on the stage. More? No voices.